All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, so glad to be talking today. It is a Friday, so free for all day. Basically, we'll talk about some of the topics we've been exploring this week, and I always want to hear from you every day, but especially on free for all. I generally don't have guests, and I've had some really good guests this week. I think yesterday we had Arlen, a special Thursday with Arlen. We had Carlos Monday, and I was hoping to have Dave, I believe it's Chapman, joining us. This week, he is an anti-ICE activist out there warning folks that ICE thugs are in the vicinity. And he actually has paid the price for that. Got arrested and fined and all that good stuff, or bad stuff. We'll be talking to him next week. Couldn't make it this week. So a lot going on. Halitics. Some really interesting stories today. Got a little bit of a late start, just trying to get all my ducks in a row, if you will. And lots of noticed we had a really good number of viewers live yesterday. So if you're one of them who stuck around and decided you want to check me out again, what I really want is to talk to you. Give me a call, 240-242-5646. There are very few podcasters out there who take calls, and it's a little bit of a technical challenge. I've got it figured out. I think maybe some hosts don't feel like going through that. And also, it's a wild card, right? I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. I want to hear from you. I love it when callers disagree with me. The thing that we try to do here, what we're trying to do here, is have that respectful, but it can be heated as long as it's respectful dialogue where we talk about the challenges we're facing as a nation and the best ways to address them. Really, really interesting result in New Jersey yesterday, I guess, announced, or this morning. It looks like it's not definite, although Track AIPAC, or I guess this is Citizens Against AIPAC Corruption, I'm assuming they're part of Track AIPAC, is declaring victory in the special election to take Mikey Sherrill's now vacant slot in the House of Representatives. Now, this is a primary, so I don't know that Analila Mejia, or I do know that Anna Lilia, there you go, I got it. I do know that Anna Lilia Mejia will not be taking her spot yet in, that is Mikey Sherrill's spot yet in the House, but this means that she is ready to run in November, and it's almost certain that she will be the winner because it's a very, very blue district. So I guess I called it a special. It wasn't a special in the sense that there was an open seat. Mikey Sherrill was not running for re-election. If she had been, probably it's a no contest whatsoever. It's interesting. What's ironic about this is that AIPAC was involved, right? They have some sort of group that's United for Democrats for Peace or something, which is really just a front group for Zionist donors, Zionist billionaires who are all in for the Israeli genocide. And Mejia ran as the 100% AIPAC-free candidate. What's interesting is that AIPAC trained its sights not on Mejia, but on Tom Malinowski. So that's what's kind of curious. Malinowski was a former representative who decided to get into this race, and he was considered the favorite, and he had taken a slightly less than all-in approach towards Israel. Now, he had always been an ally, right, viewed as reliable, but he frustrated some of the most ardent, most aggressive Zionists by the position he took recently that, no, we shouldn't be funding Israel without conditions. We shouldn't just keep giving them money, a blank check, bottomless supply of weapons and money while they're violating human rights, or when there are credible claims that Israel is violating human rights. And therefore, the AIPAC donors decided they were going to try to take him down. They went after him, claiming he wasn't strong enough against ICE, that he was not really adamant. Now, this is a district with a lot of a large Latino population and very progressive population in general, and they are opposed vociferously, vehemently to the ICE thugs. Malinowski, who has spoken out against ICE, he's been pretty good about it, I think, wasn't quite good enough on one occasion. Now, trust me, I'm not a Malinowski fan. But what AIPAC stooges did is use that one or two speaking engagements where Malinowski wasn't quite aggressive enough in his condemnations of ICE to paint him as pro-ICE in a very left-leaning district. This caused him to lose some support, and the favorite ultimately looks like he is going to go down in a very, very close race to Ana Lilia Mejia, who will win with under 29% of the vote. This is kind of, I guess there's irony. I guess it's backfiring, as Haaretz says, because the winner now is going to be much more critical, much more willing to take on Israel in the House than Malinowski. And so I think, Track AIPAC is taking a victory lap here. And so is, we showed you there. See, look, Citizens Against AIPAC Corruption, primary win. I can't get all excited about this. I mean, I'm glad she won. It is much better that Mejia is almost certain to be the representative from New Jersey starting next Congress. It's certainly better than if it were Malinowski, although Malinowski is not the worst. But I can't view this as some endorsement or embrace by the New Jersey electorate of a pro-peace, anti-genocide candidate. It just doesn't look like that. And let's go through this. AIPAC spends $2 million. Haaretz says it backfires. The crowded primary was widely seen as the first litmus test of AIPAC's efforts to set a red line for Dems who call to condition military aid to Israel and challenge the status quo of the U.S.-Israel relationship. So that worked, right? I mean, if Mejia prevails, and it looks like she will, she's got about an 800-point lead, and there aren't that many votes to count. Very few. It looks almost certain she will get the nomination. How is this not a successful buy by AIPAC? Now, again, AIPAC couldn't care less about immigration. They're totally, if anything, their donors support ICE. They have no problem with dividing up the electorate and scapegoating immigrants for the problems in America, poor, struggling, working class Americans face. What they want is to keep poor, struggling, working class Americans from focusing their ire on a government that's pouring billions and billions and billions of dollars into the Israeli genocide to support the Israeli genocide of Palestine. And AIPAC doesn't care who's supporting that genocide, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, as long as somebody, the people in power, are supporting it. And that, we have seen, is the case. I don't see how this is a situation where AIPAC lost. AIPAC did set a red line. Clearly, their money, their $2 million spending spree, apparently took down a moderate Democrat who dared to have the temerity to suggest we shouldn't just give Israel a blank check. Now, the argument that Haaretz would make, that progressives are making, as well, it's better to have Mejia than it is to have Malinowski in Congress. And I agree with that. I would have voted for Mejia. I think she's flat out said it's a genocide. And I'm sure they're not thrilled at AIPAC that she won. They would have much preferred Tahisha Way, who got third place, who is considered an AIPAC ally, an Israel ally. They would have much preferred Tahisha Way. But what I think AIPAC's calculus is, well, all right, so there's one lefty. We can easily paint her as a socialist. We can easily present her as out of step. Now, look, the positions that Mejia is going to take, mostly, certainly on economic issues, are going to be popular with the American public. She is for Medicare for all. That's what most Americans want. She is against funding Israel. That's what most Americans want. So on really important issues, she's going to support much higher taxes on the wealthy. That's what most Americans want. But she can be painted with AIPAC's millions and millions of dollars more from other corporatists, corporate-aligned groups, as somehow a socialist, a Marxist, whatever term they want to use, and I don't know, but I'm going to guess, because I haven't looked too closely in it, she will take some pretty leftist views, or what are considered to be to the left views, on social and cultural issues, which will alienate some working class voters. They'll spend all their money, time, energy focusing on her cultural, social views and marginalize her. That would have been much harder to do with Malinowski. You have a center-left, centrist Democrat who comes on the floor of the House and says, hey, we really shouldn't be giving Israel all this money because they're committing genocide. That could be a much greater threat to Israel's hegemony in Congress than if a far-left congresswoman from New Jersey, from a majority-minority district, takes that same position, or actually takes a much further to the left position. It's interesting here. Sanders and AOC both endorsed Mejia. And it seems like she's been a little bit more outspoken against Israel. AOC, of course, famously funding Iron Dome, refusing to support MTG's bill to cut off funding to Israel for defense, quote, defensive arms as well as offensive. So I don't, sure, Mejia will be presumably in that left flank, and she'll join, she'll replace Jamal Bowman. But they had no real influence, right? They had no real power. AIPAC, I'm not sure they lost. Look at the message they sent. They sent a very chilling message to centrists who have taken their money in the past. Hey, if you aren't 100% on board the Zionist train, you express any reservations whatsoever about Israel, we're going to take you down. And even if that means it's someone who's more honest, more outspoken against Israel wins, we'll pay that price because we want to keep you in line. I think that's ultimately where they would come down. That's ultimately what they would say. Yeah, we would have preferred Tahisha Way win. Sure, we don't want another firebrand in Congress, but ultimately we can marginalize Anna Mejia to the extent we couldn't marginalize Malinowski. So I can't say this is some sort of great win. And I'll say another point why I have a problem. Why I don't view this as some great victory for the peace movement, for the anti-genocide movement, for those of us who want to hold the murderers accountable. Because this was a race where the winner didn't even get to 30%. And 45% of the voters, if I did my math right, 45% out of the 83% who voted for one of the top three candidates, which is Malinowski, Mejia, the winner, presumably, and Way, the great majority of the voters for those three candidates voted for a Zionist candidate. Seems to me that UDP set that red line. You advocate for conditional aid to Israel, you're going to lose. Yeah, we might ultimately have to bite the bullet and see every now and then again a real lefty win, but whatever. It's worth it. It's worth it. We've got to keep our friends fully on board, fully in the tent. And we've seen that from thug groups. You know, look, the mafia, who do they kill first? Anyone that they view as a potential traitor to the organization. Anyone who was inside who dares step out. And even a little tiny bit, right? Either you're with us, or if you're against us at all, you're totally against us. So look at that result. This is not ranked choice voting. This is not like in New York City where we can all say that the winner of the mayor's race, Zohran Mamdani, got over 50% of the vote. The majority of New York City voters want a guy who says no to Israel, who stands up to Israel, who recognizes that Israel is a rogue state, a criminal state. We can easily say that about the New York City election. We cannot say that about what happened in that New Jersey primary special. I don't know why they call it primary special. I mean, I guess there's going to be a special election. I guess what that means is that Mejia is going to actually run against a Republican in the next couple months, or next month maybe. And then she'll have to run again in November. She's almost certainly going to win. If you look at those numbers, Malinowski and Way, 45% together versus just under 29% for Mejia. Malinowski and Way are both viewed as allies of Israel, even though Israel First candidates, track AIPAC calls them, Israel First candidates. So given that fact, I just can't be taking any victory laps just because ultimately the best candidate did win. It's good. It's better than it would have been the other way around. But to portray this as some terrible loss for AIPAC, heck, they won. They wanted to defeat a potential defector, and they defeated him. It's not good. It's not good. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. Probably haven't here at Halitics spent enough time really focusing on just how completely corrupt our government was, or how corrupted by Epstein our government, our power, our power center has been. It's extraordinary. And I do give credit to Ro Khanna, a congressman from California, for really keeping this front and center. I posted this, I shared this at Halitics, and I was very, it's really good work that he's doing. So here was this, let's see if we have I wanted to actually get what he wrote, but what Khanna is doing is he is working with Thomas Massey. We're talking about Tom Malinowski in New Jersey. He is working now with Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massey, a Republican who Trump hates. Trump wants to defeat him the way AIPAC wanted to take down Tom Malinowski. He is a Republican who has basically left the fold in many ways. And Massey, along with MTG and Lauren Boebert, voted with Democrats to release all of the Epstein files. So now Khanna and Massey have requested a meeting with the Justice Department, presumably Pam Bondi or some other high-level Trump flunky, to say, how come you're redacting the names of the people who are sending this email and others? And this is quite extraordinary. So the question that Khanna and Massey have, why did you black out? See where it says from? It's blacked out. It says to J.E., you can't quite read it, but J.E.E. vacation. So that's Epstein at gmail.com. And this was sent to Epstein. It wasn't from Epstein like as a sales pitch. Guess what? This new Brazilian just arrived, sexy and cute. And I circled it because one of the commenters said, 9 years old. 9 years old. Why is it redacted? Why are there all those black marks across the identifiers? Who sent this? Is this somebody who's in power now? Is this somebody who had power recently and elected? Is this a billionaire? Who sent this? We need to know. We should know. I think the best argument, and there's so many arguments, was it Trump? Probably not Trump, only because my understanding is Trump had broken with Epstein earlier than this. At least that's what Trump says. And as far as we know, his contacts with Epstein ended in the late aughts, right? 2007, something like that. I don't know. There was some issue, right? Epstein was propositioning or hitting on people at Mar-a-Lago, and of course, Trump can't let that happen. So he may have broken with him then. But maybe it was, somebody close, higher up in Trump's circle. We just don't know. It's disgusting. I thought Brianna Joy Gray, in an interview she did on her most recent podcast, made a really strong point. And at first, I was a little skeptical of the legitimacy of the point. I thought, well, maybe she's overreaching. Could she be overreaching? And then I thought, after I saw this from Khanna and Massey, and then I saw this, another email that was where the identifier was redacted, thinking, after I thought about what, the guy who Trump had, Matt Gaetz said when he went to Israel, how his room was searched. The Israeli agents were clearly looking to find any dirt they could to hold all over his head. Yeah, I started to think, maybe Brianna Joy Gray is 100% right. That the reason that Democrats continue almost in lockstep, not in lockstep, but close to support Israel. The reason that Kamala was willing to lose the election, to risk and ultimately lose the election to Trump, when it was clear she would have benefited from breaking with Israel, at least to some degree, is because there's some incredible hold Israel has over so many Democrats, perhaps through their connection to Epstein, that Epstein somehow, was entangled so many electeds, both Republican and Democrat, in this pedophile pedophile operation. It was so big, it was so all-encompassing when it comes to the richest and most powerful people in the world, that they could not risk that information coming out, that evidence coming out. Now, I'm not sure how that redounds to Harris. I have no reason to think she was involved. But maybe people she knows were, people she cares about were. Maybe there was something that, her billionaire donors. She got a lot of money from billionaires. She spent $1.5 billion to lose to Trump. So maybe there's people in her orbit that she simply cannot risk offending who sent emails like this to Jeffrey Epstein. Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty. Sent from iPhone. It's really, really frightening that this corruption has so completely ensnared our government to the point where quite possibly the Democrat. Now, I think the real reason the Democrat Party isn't on your side is just greed. It's corruption, but not corruption because there's blackmail and extortion by Epstein and a pedophilia ring. I don't think that's the main factor. There may be some. I think it's just that the millions and millions of dollars being dangled in front of these lawmakers and the fear that if they break with Israel in any way, like Tom Malinowski, they're likely to go down to defeat. I think that's the main factor. But I don't rule out the possibility that there are some lawmakers who are constantly under the axe of being exposed as complicit in pedophilia, knowing that there was an operation that sex trafficked in underage girls and that they were part of it, and that perhaps they also engaged in sex with underage kids. That doesn't strike me as implausible in the least. All right, again, love to talk to you. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. And I want to see if we've got some comments left to get. I haven't always been checking the comments, but hopefully we'll get some. This one, I really have to say, I do get it. I get the partisanship. You know, when I talk to people I really respect, like Arlen, he really, in my opinion, has a block acknowledging just how bad the Democrats are. And I get this from people I talk to now, obviously he's going to have a different take. So, and sometimes I think the block even, look, Carlos, my other co-host, I should probably not talk about them, but when I've asked him, I said, well, do you think maybe we should have supported Harris? And he's like, no, she's that bad. And she is that bad. And I don't have any regrets that I voted for Jill Stein. But I think maybe some of us on the far left, the Green Party voters and the like, and I will confess to this crime myself. It's a crime, but perhaps this error is slightly underrating just how badly Trump could screw even up what few good things remain. And I think he's done. I think that the biggest fear I have now is that to the extent that our election results reflect the vote, that may no longer be the case. That there can be a way in the midterms that the results, the ultimate, quote, winners, the people who sit in places of power, will not be the people that most voters wanted to sit in those places of power. And I don't think the Democrats did that. Now, the Democrats did all sorts of other things that were just terrible. The kneecapping Bernie Sanders, the way that they, coalesced together around Joe Biden. But in the end, Democratic Party primary voters could have and should have elected Bernie in 2016. They did not have to elect Hillary. And if they had voted for Bernie in greater numbers, he would have won. It wouldn't have been rigged in the sense that more people voted in a particular primary for Bernie and yet Hillary won. That wouldn't have happened. Now I fear that could happen. That even if more people in a particular state vote for whoever or in a particular district, vote for whoever the Democrat is, we still might find ourselves with Republicans winning, quote, winning, unquote. That's something Democrats haven't done. That really frightens me. I'm not saying it'll happen. That frightens me. I didn't really, probably discounted too much the possibility that would happen. And I also worry very, very much that there's enough MAGA people out there who will accept clear cut evidence of voter fraud, of election theft. If Trump does that, won't care, or be in denial. And the reason I bring that up is because this story is sort of making the rounds, and I saw somebody on Halitics, Facebook Halitics, who presents this story as evidence that Trump really did win, that he wasn't a sore loser, he wasn't trying to subvert democracy, the election really was stolen from him. So it looks bad when you first read that, right? Amidst a verifying 315,000 votes without poll worker signatures. So I can tell you what happened, because I work polls. And when people vote, when they come in, when they register to vote at the polling place, right? Not when you register beforehand, you register to vote. When you come in, you sign in, and there's a poll worker supposed to sign next to your signature. And then the poll worker gives you a ballot. Or you are you're given either a ballot itself that you fill out, or a little card that you insert in a voting machine. And only people who are actually registered to vote in that election can get that card. It's just that simple. You get the card from the poll worker. And the poll worker can only give you the card if you're registered. They have to mark you off. Now, you're supposed to sign, and I know this because I used to sign those voter ID, the voter form that was given to me. I would sign it, or sign on a line where they would sign. But, it's just purely clerical. Either the person is registered to vote or not. If they're not registered to vote, they can't get a ballot, because each ballot goes to a registered voter. That's who gets it. You have to mark it off on your sheet. So yeah, somebody didn't sign a line. That's all that means. There's no way that could have resulted in people who weren't supposed to vote voting, or extra votes or double votes or anything like that. The only way that would have happened is if you could find the same name twice, which you're not going to find because they look through it. Now, I think the best evidence that nothing untoward happened there is what Brad Raffensperger, the Republican Secretary of State, had to say about this. It wouldn't have changed results. There was a heavily audited. We looked at everything. A clerical error at the end of the day does not erase valid legal votes. Right? What's your solution? Somebody didn't sign it. They were tired. It was the end of the day. What's your solution? You're going to throw the votes out? And we don't even know who those votes were for. A clerical error at the end of the day does not erase valid legal votes. All voters were verified with photo ID and lawfully cast ballots. It's really just that simple. But what's so frightening is just that little wedge, that little I that wasn't dotted, that T that wasn't crossed, is enough for some MAGA folks to start screaming and shouting from the rooftop, see, it was stolen, it was stolen. I don't know what we do about that. I don't know how you handle that. I get it. The Democrats do that stuff too. Trump didn't win. There's no way he could have beaten Hillary. This is the most qualified woman ever. How could she possibly lose to this guy? It must have been the Russians. Right? I mean, that was the battle cry. So I get it. There is this refusal to acknowledge reality. But folks, this is a Republican who flat out said, yeah, everybody who voted was a registered voter who was eligible. I mean, it's really that simple. All right, would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. And yeah, the news just, it's challenging. It's problematic. I do think what we're seeing now is a real blue wave. Americans have had it with Trump. Trump is so bad. Let's put, I said this about Kamala. She's so bad that voters voted for Trump. And I think that's true. I think that's a very fair point. She was such a poor candidate in so many different ways that people actually were willing to vote for Trump. Enough people were willing to vote for Trump that he could win. And he did win. I think what we're seeing now is the flip side of that. Trump is so bad. He is so clearly corrupt that people are going to vote for Democrats. That, this guy who's doubled his net worth in less than a year in office, when I say less than a year, as of September of 25, I think it was Forbes estimated that Trump's net worth had jumped from about $3+ billion to over $7 billion. He's engaged in all manner of shady dealings to promote his own assets like crypto and the like. The Trump coin or whatever it is one example of that. Although, interestingly, crypto has now dropped in value. And it has no, as far as I still don't get I've really tried to understand this. It doesn't have the backing. People say, well, what about the dollar? The dollar's just fiat, right? That's the word I love. Fiat currency. The government just says it's worth $1, so it's fiat. We're saying by fiat. Here's the deal. The reason a dollar has value is because it is the legal currency. It actually has, it's used by everybody and has to be used by everybody to transact business, unless you want to use a barter system. So that has great value, right? If I have $1, I have a choice. I want to buy a cow. I can either bring, 10 chickens, or I can, and then take the cow home with me, or I can bring, $100 to the farmer. That's what the cow costs. I don't know what the cow costs. It's true for everything. I want to buy a bottle of whiskey. I can give cash or credit card, which is like cash. It's similar. It represents cash. Or I have to bring them, half dozen eggs to get my bottle of whiskey. It'd be pretty cheap whiskey. You could get it for half a dozen eggs, even with the price of eggs when they were skyrocketing. So obviously that dollar has value because it has to be accepted for payment. Now, the dollar's value could go up or down, depending on the supply of dollars, depending on the supply of goods available, shortages and the like. But ultimately, the value is that purchasers and sellers of items have to accept it. That's not true for crypto. Crypto, you can accept it if you want, but you don't have to. You say, I don't want that crap. It doesn't mean anything. It's just numbers. It's just a bunch of zeros and ones that have no real value. I still just don't get. Now, I understand there's certain, right? It's like a stamp or something like a stamp, like during World War II, you're trying to get out of Germany. You were, maybe you were Jewish, you were an Untermenschen, you were sought by the Gestapo, whatever. You wanted to get out. And so you tried to reduce your assets to the smallest volume possible. Maybe you buy a rare postage stamp. You're going to have to pay an awful lot for it, and you won't be able to get as much for it when you get to France or the UK or wherever you're going, United States. But still, it's better than carrying a wallet full of Deutschmarks that some Gestapo will steal from you. You keep that little stamp, in your, your shoe or something, tucked in the liner of your underwear. Maybe they won't find it. Well, that's like what the Dogecoin, right? The crypto is. It's, you don't carry it. It's you just have the number, the secret number, the password, what have you, to access it. So that maybe does have a little value, that you can transfer the asset from place to place. But ultimately, its worth is only based on what someone else will pay for it. That isn't the case with a dollar or a franc. Well, they don't have francs, or a euro or a pound sterling. That value derived from the fact that it has to be accepted by merchants when people try to buy items. That's the value that it has. And you could say, well, that's true for a stamp too, Hal. And I would say it is true. But the stamp has value based on its rarity, based on its uniqueness, based on its history, right? Like that was the first stamp that the Republic of Malta ever published or sold. But none of that is true for crypto. There's nothing unique about crypto. So ultimately, I do expect the value of it to crash. Maybe it won't. Trump's made a lot of money, however, from selling crypto to what I would call suckers and chumps. Now, I know a lot of people make money from it, but to me, they're still suckers and chumps because they're relying on the greater fool theory. They're relying on someone else paying even more for something that intrinsically has no value. But that's what Trump is. And I get it. A lot of MAGA, they don't care. Whatever. You're just a hater. You just hate him. I understand that. But more and more people really are seeing that the emperor has no clothes. And he's so bad that it looks like Democrats are poised to prevail in the midterms. And by big numbers, looks like the Senate may well go as well. Unless, again, something, there's a big thumb put on the scale. I'm not counting any chickens, no hatches, no hatching yet. I'm going to kind of final topic, maybe have a shorter program today, unless you call me. I'll tell you right now, unless you call me, this show will be relatively short, I believe. I put in the show description, Shameless NYT. And I just never failed to be disappointed by the New York Times. They're always say you've got to be willing to own up to your own mistakes. You've got to take responsibility for what you've done. If you want people to listen to you, to believe you, to be willing to reconsider their mind, reconsider their views, you got to be open to your own mistakes. And I don't see enough of that, but I really don't see that in the New York Times. So I don't disagree with what they're writing here. Trump's stifling of dissent reaches a new level. I think it's really bad. And we've seen this. You criticize the government, you take a risk in this society, in this environment right now. You stand up to ICE thugs, you're taking a risk. You write an email to a prosecutor asking him not to treat immigrants like dirt, and you're going to get investigated for it. At least that's what the Washington Post tells us. And now, if the Washington Post tells you that, the Washington Post is going to see its news staff gutted. Its ability to hold Trump accountable, to hold the Trump administration accountable, is going to be eviscerated. So The Times has a great point. But why should we believe you? You were carrying water for the Biden administration, the corruption. Now, I don't, what they say is the autocracy index. I wouldn't have called Biden exactly an autocrat. I would call him an oligarch. I would call him a warmonger. But I wouldn't necessarily call him an autocrat in the sense that he was preventing other politicians from gaining power illegally, using every means at a disposal, fair or foul, to win elections. I don't think he quite did that. But what he did do was bad enough that it paved the way for Trump. He appointed to his cabinet three of the most powerful people in the world were directly tied to the weapons manufacturing industry. And then he strongly supported two terrible, terrible military operations: the war in Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza. I don't know how you can separate those awful policies from his appointment of Antony Blinken, from his appointment of Lloyd Austin, from his appointment of Avril. Was it Haynes? Is that her name? I believe it was April Haynes. I don't know how you can separate the horrible Biden policies that so destabilizing, led to so much death and destruction, from those clearly corrupt decisions, those utterly indefensible appointments. Antony Blinken, ties to Boeing. Boeing makes the bombs, many of the bombs that have been used in the Israeli genocide of Gaza. Lloyd Austin on the board of Raytheon, huge profits from wars against in Ukraine and the genocide in Gaza. Avril Haines, Palantir, connected, spying organization. You can't separate out those absolutely horrific appointments from where we are now in terms of a security state, a surveillance state, a state that is tied to genocide, and also from the victory that Trump, that led to Trump, right? That Trump's win was a result of these terrible policies that the New York Times never questioned, never challenged, never had any bad word to say about. No acknowledgement of its own failings. And why not? Because they're in, bed with the same people, because they're profiting as well, because their leadership, their management is part of that same corrupt cabal. So I can't expect them to be honest, but it is shameless, nevertheless, to simply attack Trump without recognizing the terrible, terrible things that you did, the ways you're responsible, you're complicit, the way the New York Times is complicit. I'll just end with this point. Yes, dissent is being stifled in ways that I don't believe I've seen. At least, I don't remember Kent State. That was 1970, 4 dead in Ohio. I don't remember that. I was alive. I don't remember that. That was stifling dissent, right? National Guard starts firing on student protesters. But what I will say is under Biden, we saw crackdowns on college campuses. We saw free speech under attack when students had the temerity to challenge the Israeli genocide. And Biden never championed them, never stood up for them, didn't fight for them, didn't say, we need to have free speech. Now, was he as bad as Trump? No, clearly not. There are shades, there are degrees. Biden was pretty bad. You saw a Democratic Party that refused to give any speaking engagement, any voice to the victims of Israeli-American genocide, right? The Palestinian people were not allowed to have a spokesperson at the Democratic National Convention. Now, I wouldn't say that's not stifling dissent, but it's not giving voice. It's not democratic. New York Times has nothing to say about it. New York Times has nothing to say about the extraordinary rise in inequality. Now, they may have Thomas Edsall write pieces about it, Jamel Bowie talk about it a little bit, but they don't connect that to democratic policies that therefore led to understandable voter disenchantment with the Democrats and a willingness to embrace an autocrat like Trump. Times doesn't talk about that. All of this is happening because of a terrible Democratic Party that has failed to champion working people and has embraced the billionaire class. And the response, I guess we'll vote for Trump. Now people see how bad Trump is, and they'll go back to the Democrats. It's a ping pong ball. It's terrible. All right. Yeah, I just hear some comments from, let's just respond to Art. It's true you don't understand crypto because the meme coins are just gambling and Bitcoin is a store of wealth. Yeah, I understand that, Art. Bitcoin is you say blockchain, it's right. It's like some code on the internet. It's not a store of wealth. It's not like that blockchain represents, a pound of gold somewhere in some bank. That would be representing a store of wealth. It's still only worth what someone else assigns it. And it's purely ephemeral. It's not real. It's not a thing. It's just data points. And this is the other response. It's not purely clerical. The voter fraud out of control. Democrats are fighting so hard to keep illegal immigrants in this country because supposedly they're voting. Not one of the voters in that Atlanta election, in that Georgia election in Fulton County, was, as far as we have any reason to think, illegal. And the fact that there wasn't a signature next to the voters when they checked in to their signature doesn't make it more likely that they were illegal, because the person who signed in had to be a registered voter. So if they're registered, they're not, quote, illegal. 240-242-5646. There's no evidence. There's not one undocumented person who's been identified as having voted. I believe that is actually the case. I said, I'm not saying it never happened. I believe that despite all the efforts, and we're going to end the show with this. I'm going to Google this though. I don't believe that there has been ever a case of an undocumented person identified as having voted. Now, maybe there's one or two. I can't guarantee there are none. This is what the Brennan Center for Justice. Non-citizen voting is vanishingly rare. I guess, and then they say extraordinarily rare. All right, so they say incident rates between 0.0003% and 0.0025%. But that's voter fraud. That doesn't mean that it's a non-citizen. The rare fraud that was reported could be traced to false claims by the loser of a close race, mischief, and administrative or voter error. There is no evidence. It's there's not one person. Maybe they say, yeah, we found somebody. I don't know who that person is. Yeah. So there you go. Find someone, identify, name, place, ballot. Who was it? Who's this illegal, in quotes? Until we see that, the only legit, the only reasonable conclusion is they're fake, they're false claims by sore losers, by people who are unwilling to acknowledge that they lost and that their candidate lost. It really is that simple. All right, that'll do it for my program today. Have a great weekend. Hope you enjoy the time off. If you have it, you deserve it, and everyone should have it. Unfortunately, due to Democrats and Republicans, far too many don't. Thanks for being part of Halitics. I will see. We have a Carlos Monday coming up, and looking forward to that very, very much.